Today, I'm going to be installing my Waterlock muffler. But before I do that, I want to explain to you what the purpose of a Waterlock muffler is. On any marine diesel engine, the way that the engine is kept cool, is kept from overheating, is water is pumped into the engine from beneath the bolt through a through hole into a hose that circulates the water around the engine. And then the water comes out through an exhaust elbow and mixes with the exhaust gas and goes through a hose that exits through the back of the boat. Now, a problem can happen when that hose behind the engine is long enough and high enough that when you turn off the engine, the water in that hose will fall back down, and that there's so much water in the hose that it can come back into the engine through the wrong chamber, the exhaust chamber, because there was a Y and it forked this way when it came out, but when it's going back in, it just goes both ways. So it goes through the exhaust chamber, it can get into the cylinder head, and if it sits in there for too long, it will corrode the piston rings, and the salt can scratch the piston rings, which can ruin the compression of the engine and cause a whole slew of other problems, which happened to me before during my 400-mile solo sail trip, and I had a catastrophic engine failure for this reason. You can watch my video entitled 400-mile solo sail to get the details about that. But without further ado, this is a Waterlock muffler. And what you do is on the hose that's going out of the engine, you cut that hose and you cut it at the lowest point in its slope. And you put this is the part that goes from the engine, and you clamp it onto there on one end. And then you clamp the other end onto here, and you'll have to cut a section out of it to make up for the space it takes up. And this is going to catch the water that's in the hose when you turn off the engine so that it doesn't come back out here and flood the engine. Let's go do it. All right. I'm gonna do everything right this time, installing this Waterlock. I'm gonna read every instruction. I know that I was reading the catalog at Fisheries Supply, and there was this formula for calculating like the volume of like what you need in the Waterlock based on your hose size. It's all in millimeters. Okay, so pi divided by 4 times the hose diameter squared in millimeters times the length of the hose, also in millimeters, times 0.25. That's like 0.25. That's European for 0.25. And then the whole thing times 2, which is a safety margin. And 0.25 is because 25% of the water in the hose is what you actually need to be able to catch, just because of, I guess, how the hose is constructed, that most of it will stay in the hose anyway, I think that's why. And then divide the whole thing by 1000.000. You have to divide everything by that to convert to liters. Hi, is this Vetus? Okay, great. Will you connect me to tech support, please? Thank you. So I'm about to install a Waterlock muffler, and I feel like I think I understand all of the math and everything, but I just want to make sure I'm getting this right because I've had 2 engines flood with water. And I really just don't want this to happen again. I calculated the volume based on the formula in your catalog, and I got that the capacity that I need is 0.6 gallons. And that number, it's written in like European lettering, so it's like 1000.000, and I think that actually means a million, right? Yeah, so like the whole thing is divided by 1 million, which would totally make sense because my calculation is, for my size engine, it seems right. It's like 0.6 gallons is what I need. But the one I have is the NLP, and the capacity I see is 1.2 gallons. So I'm glad it's comfortably oversized. So I have twice as much capacity as I need, and also the I see in the calculation there's a safety factor already factored in, so I actually have like 4 times as much capacity as I need, right? Yeah, cool. So a question I had then was, so I've measured like really carefully. I see in the diagram it says that the top of the muffler needs to be at least 2 inches below the injection point on the exhaust elbow where the cooling water meets the exhaust. And I've measured, like I kind of measured over with a level gauge to make sure that I was at the right height to see, because it's so far back from the engine. So I had this level gauge and I had a yardstick so that I could, so that I make sure I'm totally even across when I'm measuring. And it shows that I'm like 1¼ inches below it. But since I'm so much over the capacity I need, I'm wondering, is that okay? Oh, cool. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so I don't need to go any lower because I don't think I can. So that's fine? Okay, great. Awesome. Well, yeah, that was my question for now, but I'm sure I'm going to have more questions and maybe even send you guys some pictures before I run my engine just to make sure you guys think everything is okay. All right, great. Cool. Thank you so much. All right, bye. I have fiberglassed in a mount that I made out of white oak from the local lumber store, and I fared it down on the edges to perfectly fit the contours of the engine bed, and put a few layers of glass cloth, epoxied it in, and then I painted over it this morning so it's had a chance to dry. And now I'm going to put the muffler down for placement. It's a really tight space, so this is going right here, and I've cut it so that this extends out a little bit so that it will meet all of the screw holes, and then the screw holes in the back are in a good place too, and it'll be just like that. Now I'm going to mark them with a permanent marker. I'm going to make little dots. Let me make sure this is exactly where I want it first, because we do not want to be drilling through the boat. I do not want to have to be hauling my boat out because I drilled a hole in my boat. And if you'd like to see when that happened, again, please reference my 400-mile solo sail video. So yeah, that is safely within the mount. No drilling through this boat tonight. So marking all of the screw holes here. The permanent marker doesn't reach. Really? Really? The permanent marker doesn't, oh, it just reaches, okay. The 2 front dots out of all those dots. And then, all right, those are, I know which dots to drill on. I can remember. I made quite a few dots by accident. Now, remove this. Okay. There. Be so glad not to have to move that thing around the boat out of the way all the time because there's nowhere to put it. Now I'll get the drill. We want the biggest screw that we can possibly fit through these holes because that will give us maximum support, and we want it to be short enough that it doesn't need to go through that far. This isn't like a high load application. In fact, some people don't even use shit. What else is new? Something fell in the engine bed. Yeah, a lot of people don't even screw it down. But it really is a good idea to screw it down, don't get me wrong. But the hose does a lot to hold it in place, so it's not like this is the only thing that's holding it in place. So we need to get 4 screws just like this one. I do have a little bit of PTSD from that time I drilled a hole through my boat and had to haul out. So, and I know that the mount is over enough, but it's just PTSD. It's psychological. Okay. Which dots was it back here? Which dots? Oh, really? Oh, there. Found them. Oh, good. No water's coming through. That's awesome. There's no water coming out of that hole. Now, let's get the muffler. Thank you. Oh, another reason I cut it like this is because there's a drain plug that I want to, so that when it needs to drain, it will drain down here. So I cut a little gap here so that it will just drain down here instead of pooling on the mount. So all right, I've got those, and I'm gonna use a hand screwdriver to put those screws in. Well, I'm gonna just get them started for now. I don't need it to be up while I'm doing this because the mounts you can just slide it on, at least for 2 of them, not the back ones. You can slide it on for 2 of them later, so just get it started without it, and that's fine. That's not going anywhere. All right, next, I'm gonna cut the hose. So the thing I love about the NLP muffler style is that it has the most articulation and adjustment possible. Other mufflers have fixed elbows. These can rotate 360, both of them. Not only that, but the top chamber and the bottom chamber, this thing here, it can also rotate 360. So I have made it so that this comes at an exactly a fair angle to this. Whereas if I had gotten another style, like the Vetus makes another style called the LP, where it's just, you know, you have to have it this way and the outlet has to be right here, like at this angle. So if you have the hose, you can't curve the hose. So that's why I love this one. You can just make it work. And I'm not being sponsored by Vetus at all. I just love this muffler. I'm gonna cut it right here. Right here. Another question is, how am I going to get on there? Okay, I've already bolted it down. All right, here we go. I do this every day at work. Can you believe that? Every day. Have so little to show for it. It's because of the confined space, that's why. It's not because I'm not strong enough. Now we just need to cut that wire pretty much. There we go. I'm actually going to unscrew the muffler because I need to move this thing in order to get the hose on it. Now I can do what I need to do. There we go. Oh, you gotta put the hose clamps on. Always put the hose clamps on before you put the hose on. We're working this hose clamp on here. It's really a tight fit, which is what you want. You want it to be as tight as possible while still fitting. But the while still fitting is the key here. While still, it must fit. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to put too much stress on it. You will work. You will do what what I see. This takes a hex key, and when you tighten it, you got to tighten it to a certain amount of torque. We know all about torque wrenches now. So I'll do that before I run the engine. But for now, it's you can tell it's a little loose here because I was moving it around. Want to double clamp it. So this one's good. It's all screwed down for the most part. Gotta fix one of those screws later. Gotta get I need like a right angle screwdriver or something because it's hitting this right here. So I can't get that one, I can only get that one. But this clamp like stripped itself out or something. I need to get one size bigger because it's just like, it's not reaching. And for some reason the other ones, they're the same size, but they worked because they didn't strip themselves out. Because I wasn't wrestling with them so much. But you get the point, you know, double clamp. And another thing is that I think like I really try to tighten this, but look, the hose is totally loose. It just moves around because I really think it's because the muffler this fitting here is 50 millimeter. It's metric. This hose is 2 inches, and an inch is 25.4 millimeters. And that means 2 inches is 50.8 millimeters, which means you got a 50 millimeter fitting with a 50.8 millimeter hose. So that's why it's just like it's like just loose enough. So what I might have to do is put sealant, some kind of like caulk or sealant on the inside of the hose, just inside. Take the hose off and put it inside like that much, put it back on, just to make up for that, you know, less than a millimeter difference that's playing a part in it being so loose. I can probably make it really, really just like get it tighter than this. But I still think that sealant will be a good idea just to compensate for the fact that you're mixing 2 different systems of measurement. There it is, the beautiful Waterlock muffler. So this is the diagram that applies to my setup because my engine is either very close to or below the waterline. This diagram has a vented loop. This has nothing to do with the exhaust. It has to do with the water coming into the boat from the in-through hole. So before it even gets to the engine, and then it goes through the cooling system of the engine. The point of the vented loop is if this is below the waterline, then the water that comes into the boat when the engine is off can siphon all the way through the engine to get here because it's going downhill. You want to make sure if your injection point is below the waterline, that you have a vented loop going all the way up here, at least 40 centimeters, because that way, the purpose of this vent is if you have any loss of pressure in the hose, which would create the conditions that would allow a siphon to start happening. Because if it siphons, you can also get water back up through the engine. The same thing can happen, just in a different way. But what happens with a vent is that if you lose pressure, the air will be sucked in through that little vent to equalize the pressure within the hose and stop any siphoning from being able to happen. So it's very important to have that vent inspected, especially if it's the kind of vented loop that has a valve in it, a little valve, because that valve can get clogged up with salt crystals from the salt water and it can get blocked, which could totally cause your engine to fail. So at least once a year you want to take off the little cap on the vent and inspect the vent and make sure there's no blockages. Or better yet, get the kind of vented loop that's like this, which instead of just a valve, a little one-way valve, you have a hose going from the top of the loop all the way going to out the side of the hole. And this is a lot more foolproof way to do it because there's no valve to get clogged. There's always going to be a little sputter of water coming out when you're running the engine. And that's exactly how you know that it's working. All you have to do is check for that little sputter of water and you know it's working. So it's a much simpler way to do it, and you never have to be wondering what's going on in there. A few more things to consider. The end point here of the muffler, oops, I'm going to deselect that. The end point of the muffler needs to be at least 30 centimeters from the injection point in the mixing elbow of your exhaust elbow. And on my engine, that's not an issue at all because it's pretty far back. The bottom of the muffler needs to be maximum of 150 centimeters from the top point of that gooseneck. And also the top point of that gooseneck needs to be a minimum of 45 centimeters from the water line. And I also checked, and mine is. The exhaust through hole where it goes out the boat needs to be at least 5 centimeters or 2 inches from the water line. And lastly, you don't need a muffler. This is a muffler. This is a Waterlock muffler. This is just a muffler, and you don't need it. But this is called a gooseneck, which has a function. So the Waterlock muffler, as I said in the beginning, keeps the water that's in the hose from falling back down into the engine when the engine is turned off. The function of a gooseneck is if you're heeled over in really high seas, like if you're offshore and you've got big waves, the function of the gooseneck is to keep the water that might come in from outside of the boat from going down here and then flooding the engine that way. So the gooseneck is to keep the water from flooding the engine if it comes in from outside the boat. The Waterlock muffler is to keep the water from flooding the engine once it's come out of the engine and it's in the hose and you turn off the engine and it falls back down. So gooseneck, keep it from flooding from outside. Waterlock muffler keeps it from flooding from already inside. And the two work together, but as in my case, since I did not have a Waterlock muffler, but I did in fact have quite an impressive high loop, which was my gooseneck, glad they thought of something, my engine still got flooded with water. So you can sometimes have a Waterlock muffler without needing a gooseneck, like if you're not going offshore and you're not going to have any significant seaways. But you should never have a gooseneck without having a Waterlock muffler, because the gooseneck by nature creates the conditions of a really high loop that if you don't have a Waterlock muffler, you're almost guaranteed to have your engine flood. So definitely keep that in mind. So that's about it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'm going to continue installing some of this stuff and also putting my engine back together. Thanks for staying with me, and I'll see you next time. Have a good week.